Welcome to the monthly vinyl voyage. In September 2022, I started an experiment, building myself a new music collection from scratch at a rate of no more than one album per month. 2 years later, it's formed 24 great albums, and I'm taking a bit of time to look at each of these purchases, to learn more about them and to reflect on what they mean to me, and to digress onto any side notes that I find interesting. This is episode 15, and I'm talking about my Christmas gift from December 2023, album number 15 in my collection. We're diving into Adele's 21, released in 2011. This episode is almost a full month late. Partly that's a result of holidays and schedules, but partly it's because I found this one really hard to write. I have several long drafts of this, but I've abandoned them, and I'm going to try and produce just a short video. Adele is undoubtedly a voice of our times, and that's enough to earn her a spot in my collection. But beyond that, I don't really have a lot of connections to her. I've never seen her live at a gig or festival, and the few live performances I've watched on TV, I've found very different to her studio output. In some ways, I was a bit relieved when my wife picked this as one of my Christmas presents. Both 19 and 21 are genuinely great albums, and I would have struggled to choose between them perhaps. Adele was born in 1988 in Tottenham, raised primarily by her mum Penny after her dad left when she was 3, a relationship that would cast a long shadow over her life and inevitably her songwriting. A young Adele was obsessed with music from early on, influenced by everyone from the Spice Girls to Etta James, and with her mum taking her to festivals and gigs at a young age. Her breakthrough came through the most 2000s of platforms, MySpace. A friend posted her demo recordings in 2006, and within months she had attracted the attention of XL Recordings. This wasn't some massive industry machine at work. This was a genuine talent discovery in the digital age. It was kind of organic and unmanufactured. Her debut album 19, released in 2008, and it was a remarkable statement of intent, but in many ways it was a warm-up for what would come next with 21. 21 was born from heartbreak, specifically a tumultuous relationship with an older man that Adele has kept largely private, referring to him only as Mr. 21 in interviews. The relationship lasted about 2 years, and when it ended with his engagement to another woman, Adele channeled all of that pain and anger and confusion into what would become one of the best-selling albums of all time. Working with producers like Rick Rubin, Paul Epworth and Dan Wilson, she created something that was both deeply personal and universally relatable. The album was recorded across various studios, including Rick Rubin's Shangri-La in Malibu, where Adele famously struggled with anxiety about working with such a legendary producer. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about something that's become almost mythical in British music, the Brit School. Officially, the Brit School of Performing Arts and Technology, it's a state-funded performing arts school based in Croydon that's produced an almost ridiculous number of successful artists. Adele graduated in 2006, and her year was particularly remarkable. Leona Lewis was there, Jessie J, but perhaps more significantly for our story, Amy Winehouse had graduated a few years earlier. The connection between Adele and Amy goes deeper than just attending the same school. Both were working-class London girls with powerful voices and an affinity for soul music. They were both deeply influenced by jazz and R&B legends, and both would find massive success with albums that dealt unflinchingly with heartbreak and personal struggle. Amy's Back to Black, released in 2006, had dominated the charts and critical conversation. It was raw, honest, and showcased a voice that felt both classic and completely contemporary. When Adele's 21 was released 5 years later, it would eventually overtake Back to Black as the UK's biggest selling album of the 21st century. 3.4 million copies over Amy's 3.3 million. It's impossible not to think about the tragic parallel and divergences in their stories. Amy's struggles with addiction were well documented, and her death in 2011, the same year that 21 was released, cast a shadow over the entire music industry. Adele has often spoken about Amy's influence on her, both musically and as a cautionary tale about the pressure of fame. "21 opens with Rolling in the Deep, and it's immediately clear that this isn't the same Adele who made 19. Co-written by Paul Epworth, the song is anthemic in a way that her previous work hadn't been. There's anger here, but also power. She's not just documenting heartbreak, she's weaponising it. The album's emotional journey is carefully constructed. Rumour Has It continues the theme of betrayal with a driving beat that feels almost vengeful. Then we get Turning Tables, which strips things back to piano and voice, showcasing just how devastating Adele can be when she's vulnerable. But it's Someone Like You that really breaks you, and the story of how it came together is remarkable. After working with Rick Rubin in his elaborate Malibu setup, Adele found herself in a tiny studio on Santa Monica Boulevard with Dan Wilson, the former Semisonic frontman. This was back to basics, just her and a piano, the way she'd always written her most personal material. Wilson remembers the session clearly. She came in and she had most of it, lyrics, structure, even the melody. My job was just to keep the door open while she poured her soul out. The song came from Adele imagining running into her ex years later, happily married with children, that universal fear and hope wrapped up in one devastating scenario. What's remarkable is that the recording we hear on the album was intended as a demo. Wilson told American Songwriter, "I was thinking, oh, they're going to make a big version of this later," but they never did. That's the recording, me on piano, her singing, recorded in that little room. Sometimes the most powerful moments happen when you strip everything else away and just let the raw emotion speak. The production throughout is immaculate. Rick Rubin's influence is subtle but crucial. He has this ability to make everything sound both contemporary and timeless. The arrangements never overwhelm Adele's voice, which remains the album's most powerful instrument. I believe Adele is a studio artist. She's known to suffer from crippling anxiety and stage fright, which can make up her live performances touch and go. And unlike many artists, she doesn't have a stage persona to hide behind. The songs she writes are about the renting cracks in her own soul, and a lot of the power comes from this authenticity and honesty, which Adele captures perfectly on vinyl. But it's a big ask for anyone to go out and deliver a worthy performance of that song, truthfully, with all the painful feelings behind it, at precisely 9 p.m. for the next 30 live gigs. As I said, I don't have a deep personal connection to Adele's music. I remember her being everywhere during the 2000s era. I certainly remember Skyfall when that came out, but she was never really on my radar as someone I actively sought out. Which brings me to a story about my friend and guitar mentor, Jonathan. Jonathan is arguably the world's biggest Bob Dylan fan, and he's a phenomenal musician, far better than I'll ever be. But we have had fairly regular jam sessions over the years, and I'm always looking for songs that might bridge our different tastes and skill levels. I was excited to discover that Make You Feel My Love, which appears on 19, not 21, but bear with me, it was actually a Bob Dylan cover. I thought this was a perfect song, a song I genuinely loved from an artist I respect, originally written by Jonathan's musical hero. Plus, I'd been working on a fingerstyle guitar arrangement, which is more in my wheelhouse than his usual lead guitar approach. So I floated the idea at our next session, but the crash was immediate and brutal. Jonathan dismissed Adele's version outright and said her voice grated on him. When I suggested we could approach it as a Dylan song, he was equally dismissive, calling it one of the few Dylan tracks he didn't really like, which was written only because of the label pressure and out of step with the rest of Time Out of Mind. It kind of burst my bubble a bit, but it also reminded me that music is intensely personal. And sometimes even the people we look up to see things completely differently. My copy of 21 is a 2020 reissue on XL Recordings. The run-out groove on the B-side reads XLLP 520 BK2329801B1KR, making it near identical to the original 2011 pressing. It features the clean green XL label design, and it comes with a standard single sleeve with the iconic close-up portrait of Adele by Lauren Dukoff. What's to love? The voice, obviously. Adele possesses one of the most distinctive and powerful voices in pop music, a mezzo-soprano with a nearly 3-octave range. But more importantly, an ability to convey emotion that feels completely unmanufactured. She's technically proficient without being showy, and even her most powerful moments feel intimate and conversational. The songwriting is remarkably mature for someone who was only 22 when the album was released. These aren't just breakup songs. They're explorations of love, loss, betrayal, and acceptance that feel universal despite their specific origins. The production deserves huge credit too. In an era of heavily produced pop music, 21 sounds organic and spacious. There's room for every element to breathe, and nothing feels overwrought or unnecessary. I predict it's going to continue to age very well. If there's a criticism to be made, it might be that 21 is almost too perfect, too complete. Every song serves the album's emotional arc, but there are moments where I wish Adele had taken a few more risks. The template is established early and rarely deviated from. But these are minor quibbles with an album that achieved something genuinely rare, a massive commercial success without compromising artistic integrity. 21 spent 24 weeks at number 1 in the US and sold over 31 million copies worldwide and won 6 Grammy Awards. And these aren't just impressive numbers. They represent millions of people finding a genuine emotional connection with one woman's very personal story. So that's 21, album number 15 in my collection. A Christmas gift that turned out to be exactly right. It's an album that reminds you why great voices and honest songwriting never go out of fashion, even in an industry obsessed with the next new thing. As always, I'm sure I've made mistakes in my research, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and corrections. Thank you for listening.